Hi and welcome. My name is Jonathan Hatfield, for those of you who don't know me. Um, I am a senior systems administrator and have been in IT for the better part of 15 years. Uh, I guess my first real role would be going back all the way to 2005, working at Fry's Electronics, back when they were still around until the pandemic when they finally closed their doors, doing computer repair. So I've been in IT for a very long time. Bounced around all sorts of different technical support roles, computer repair, help desk, and server administrator, and now I'm an IT manager for a medium-sized company. So my goal for this video, at least this particular series, is to walk you through setting up your own environment. I know there's a lot of beginners out there who are really unfamiliar with the process of just, how do I get my company from we just have a bunch of computers with no server to I want to build a proper environment, have a domain controller, centralized file shares, and bring them out of the work group standalone machines into a centrally managed infrastructure. So this, I haven't yet decided how many parts this particular series will be. We're going to start off today with creating your first domain and creating a domain controller, promoting that system to a domain controller. To not take up too much more of your time, let's go ahead, we'll jump in here. This is a, right now I'm using a VMware Workstation Pro. For those of you who haven't used that before, it's a virtualization software that allows you to install VMware Workstation Pro on your machine and allows you to create virtual machines and your own little virtual environment, and that's what I've done here. So this is a fresh Windows Server Standard 2019 installation. I literally just booted it up, installed VMware Tools on it, which is the driver package, so all the display, keyboard, mouse adapter all works correctly. So let's go ahead and let's jump right in. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with creating our first domain and installing the roles that we need to. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you've never used a server before, by default when you first install a Windows Server operating system, the first thing that's going to load automatically is the Windows Server Manager. I'll go ahead and I'll remove this little bar out of my way, and for those of you who have been using Windows Server before, you're very familiar with this dashboard. And this is how we can control, we can add, as you can see here, we can configure the server locally. It's got some shortcuts to allow things to be configured a little bit quicker. And we can install roles and features on the server, add them to groups. So if we click on local server here on the left-hand side, we'll see a few different pieces of information. We'll see the computer name. As you can see, this is a brand new machine right out of the box. It's part of a work group now because no domain exists. And you can see remote management. These are all the default settings. Remote desktop is disabled. Something definitely important that some of you may want to turn on right away. So you can have RDP access to this machine. You can set the time zone of the server, which of course is very important. The Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration. We'll go ahead and we'll just turn that off right now because we basically can't have web access without it unless we install a different browser. And there's just some shortcuts here to either configure NIC teaming, which we can't do on the system. We only have one NIC. And if you want to go in and assign a static IP address, it's a little shortcut. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to Manage, and we'll do Add Roles and Features. It'll bring up this little Add Role and Features window, and we'll go ahead and click Next on it. It'll ask you to select the installation type. We'll leave the default, role-based or feature-based installation. We'll hit Next. And if we were managing multiple servers from this particular server manager, we could, if you had 10 servers, you could use Server Manager on one machine to manage some of the roles and features of all the servers together, which makes it a little bit easier for deployment. So it'll ask you to select the server from the pool. Since there's only one, we'll go ahead, we'll hit Next. And so it brings us to this role page where we want to select our first role. And what we're going to want to do is select Active Directory Domain Services, also known as ADDS. We'll go ahead and check that box. and it'll pop up with this little role and features wizard saying, do you want to add features that are required for Active Directory Domain Services? You cannot install Active Directory Domain Services unless the following roles, services, or features are also installed. So you can see all these other things that need to be installed. It just lets you know that you need to install these things with it, and it's fully automatic. You don't need to do it individually. We of course want the management tools. That's the GUI interface of Active Directory checked. So we'll just hit add features here, and we'll hit next. And next through this, and then next one more time, and we'll go ahead and hit install. So I'll go ahead, I will pause the video right here so you don't have to watch me stare at my screen, and I'll resume it once it's done. So while the installation is not done yet, I do want to take a minute to realize that I jumped in here much too fast, and I left the computer name as the original name. For those of you who are not aware, once a server has been promoted to a domain controller, you technically can rename a computer from the GUI, but if it's a domain controller and holds roles, it will break it left and right. So, we have installed the role, but we haven't yet promoted the server to the domain controller. So what I'm going to do is, before I promote it, we're going to close this out. As you can see, the installation had finished, and we're going to rename this computer to something a little more applicable. Now remember, once the server has been promoted to a domain controller, do not ever rename it through here. I am speaking from experience, because it will break all sorts of things. There is a specific process using PowerShell that you can set the name of a domain controller, and this can only be done through PowerShell, set the name as a secondary name, and then make that the primary name. Now that I'm talking about it out loud, I'll probably make a video just for that, because it's a very important thing that I know people overlook and they don't understand, and I have personally done it in the past. But when I was, new to managing domain controllers, I undid a lot of work that I had to go back and fix because I didn't know any better. So we'll go ahead and we're going to rename this computer, and we will call it, we'll just call it 2019-DC. And since there's no domain yet, we can't join it, so we'll leave it as a work group. We'll hit OK. And of course, as you know, we're going to have to reboot the computer after this. So I will pause the video. There it is. Close and restart. I'll pause the video and resume it once it's back up. Okay, and that was rather quick. I do want to put it out there that I could have stopped the video, rewound, and started fresh. But I think it's very important for people to know not to do that, because had I just renamed the computer, you wouldn't have seen that I caught my own mistake, and maybe going forward that'll sit with you. So remember, if you have a domain controller, never rename it through the GUI. I'll make another video for it at some point. You can look it up, how to rename a domain controller. There's a very specific process. So remember that in the future, that you cannot just rename it. Anyway, so this server has been rebooted. It's back up. We'll go back to local server here, and yep, we can see here that our computer name has taken place. Our time zone is right, and remember, time is very important. And so we will go ahead. We'll see this orange flag will show up after the role has been installed. That's saying, hey, there's additional tasks that you need to do after this has been installed. It's not just done. So we'll click here, and you'll see post-deployment configuration required for Active Directory Domain Services, and there'll be a link here that says promote the server to a domain controller. So it'll bring up this configuration box, and once this loads, we'll have a few options here. And you can see here we have a couple of options. Add a domain controller to an existing domain. That's not what we want. There is no domain. Add a new domain to an existing forest. We don't have that either. Add a new forest. So now it's going to say specify the domain information for this operation. Now this is where you're going to want to enter in what do you want your domain name to be. Do you want it to be company.local, company.com? There is always a big discussion between .local and .com. Now this video isn't going to cover that, but what I will say is the pros to using a .local, we'll call it, Microsoft. You've probably seen Microsoft videos of contoso.local versus contoso.com. Using a .local is a non-routable address. It's more secure. However, you cannot purchase SSL certificates for it. You can only you can't go to GoDaddy and purchase a certificate for that. You can only use self-signed certificates by a certificate authority. But I'd be willing to bet that probably 75% or more root domain names are going to be a .local, and so that's what we're going to do here. We'll call it Hatfield.local. Will be our root domain name. So now when we want to join anything to this domain, we're going to specify Hatfield.local. So we have our domain name here. We'll hit next. And now it's going to pop up asking us a few things. What do we want the functional level of our domain? Select the functional level of the domain, the forest, and since there are no other domain controllers, since this is brand new in a single system, it's already set at the highest, which is 2016. It's going to ask us to specify domain controller capabilities. You want DNS checked, and it needs to be a global catalog because there are no other servers. A read-only domain controller you can see here is grayed out. This is useful if you have a domain controller at, let's say, a random site with just a couple of systems, and it's not very secure, so it might get stolen. So you want to do a read-only one because a domain controller caches all. It's a central repository for all of your objects and user accounts and computers and passwords and attributes and on and on and on. So I might be kind of reaching out here, but there is a lot to discover and learn about Windows Server and how domains work. So I'll probably release another video at some point to cover these different items of global catalog, read-only domain controllers, the different roles and what they do. So we'll leave all the defaults here, but we have to type a directory services restore mode password. And this is if you have some sort of corruption and you need to restore Active Directory. Like, let's say we have no backups and the operating system just goes kaput and is completely screwed, but our AD database is still functional. We could spin up a new installation of Windows Server, install the role, and be able to restore our database. And this is the password that protects that database. So I recommend making this a complicated password and make sure that you have it stored in a place where you can find it, because it does you no good if you choose some super complex password and then can't find out what it is if you ever need it. But you should always have proper backups of your image of your servers, so ideally you may never need this. In a perfect world, right? We would never need it. Actually, I'm going to change this. And we will press next on here. Now you might see this error message at the top. A delegation for DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found, yada yada yada. You will see this on every single domain controller installation that you have. Disregard it. It's benign. We don't need it right now. We can't even check the box if we wanted to because there is no DNS zone that exists. So we will go ahead and hit next here. And it's going to ask you for a NetBIOS domain name. You can see it just already pre-fills it as Hatfield. It's not going to be Hatfield.local, but we'll just leave all the defaults here. That's great. We'll hit next. And it brings us to this next place where you can see here it's got 3 locations of where the Active Directory database is stored, log files, and sysvol. Leave these as the default. This is fine. The times where you may need to modify these are rare, so I always leave it as the default for now. Maybe somebody who knows a lot more than me might have a specific reason why you want to put it on a separate share outside of the operating system. Again, 90+% of the time the defaults are fine. So we'll hit next here. Then it just brings us to this review page. The new domain name is going to be Hatfield.local, the NetBIOS domain name, all this stuff is just a quick review if we wanted to. And there's a cool little option that's new for those of you who have coming new into the modern day servers. If you've only ever used NT 2000, 2003, 2008, starting in I believe it was 2012, you could use PowerShell you always could, but it creates a little script for you. So we'll just hit View Script, and what it does is it creates a little PowerShell script. So if I needed to, let's say I'm making 30 new servers rather than going through the GUI every single time, it creates this nice little script for you that you can just copy and paste on that machine. So we'll go ahead and exit out of here, and we'll click Next. Now what it's going to do is it's going to check all these different prerequisites to make sure that this computer is capable and willing, I guess, to install ADDS and promote it to a domain controller. Okay, and that's finished. And this gets a lot of people because you don't go to do the prerequisite check and you see all these exclamation points and you're like, what's wrong? What you want to pay attention to is at the very top, all prerequisite checks passed successfully. And it just has some other kind of like FYI stuff that you may want to know. Like this computer does not have a static IP address. It should. Your domain controllers always should. But we don't need to take care of that in order to promote it. And if we scroll down, we can see all checks passed, and we can click Install. So we'll go ahead, we'll hit Install, and I hope you guys, if you're following along, I hope you're excited. You're about to make your first domain and promote your first domain controller. So stick around, I'll pause the video, and we'll keep going. Oh, and as we see here, the installation has finished, and now it's going to restart our system. I don't know if you guys caught that. As soon as it finishes installing its roles, it's going to reboot the system. So always be prepared for that. Some of the things you don't think about right away. So if this is a server that maybe has other items running on it, know that as soon as that promotion finishes, it's going to auto reboot on you with about a 5-second warning. So always keep that in mind. Okay, and it has finished installing and rebooting. We'll go ahead and we will hit Control-Delete here. And you'll notice the login screen has changed. It's going to show domain name /administrator. So we'll go ahead and sign in here. And what it did was it created an administrator account, and it copied what the local password was for the administrator to the new domain account administrator. So it's important to change that. So while this loads, you'll notice that after the promotion has finished and the server boots back up, that you're going to have a few different things have been installed. The Administrative Center, Domain Trusts, the module for Windows PowerShell, AD Sites and Services, AD Users and Computer, ADSI Edit, DNS, and Group Policy Management. Group Policy, one of the best functions of why you want to move your systems into a domain, to centrally control your organization, what your users can and cannot do, push out software, manage your computers. I mean, there's so much in group policy. Last I checked, there was about 8,000 to 9,000 different policy settings that you can put into place, ranging from everything under the sun you could think of. I live and die by group policy. I literally use it every single day at my job for something. So, yeah, maybe in another video we'll go over group policy management, because that is very exciting. I'm a huge fan of group policy. The organization that I joined a couple of years ago, they had no domain. They were a large company, a lot of systems, no domain, and so we finally, when I came on board, it was the first thing we did was start domain joining things, and you know, it's amazing how much they were doing manually that you can just easily automate, from printer installations, mapped drives, default browsers and applications, what versions of Office you want to be using, all sorts of stuff. I mean, once you get this booted up and you get group policy installed, you know, we'll poke around in the group policy management tool and create a test policy object and just go through all the different templates and settings. It's amazing. There's a lot there. So that actually will tie it up for our first video. Actually, before I sign off, we'll go ahead and we can, of course, we always go to Server Manager. And for those of you who don't know, if you go to Manage and Server Manager Properties, this little checkbox right here is how you can stop this Server Manager window from auto-opening every single time you sign in. So it can be kind of annoying once you get the particular server fully operational. Every single time you sign in, this thing loads. This little checkbox right here will do it. If you want to get to any of the tools that you now have available on the system, from Server Manager you can click on Tools and you'll see all these other things I mentioned that were installed. Admin Center, Domains and Trusts, Sites and Services, PowerShell, etc., Group Policy Management. Or, if you don't want to use that, if you click on the Start button under Windows Administrative Tools, you'll see all the same things with some nice little icons on them. What I typically do is I like to pin a lot of this stuff to the Start menu that I'll use the most, like Users and Computers and Group Policy Management and DNS. So we have now made our first domain. On our next video, we will discuss creating new user accounts and how we can create organizational units for those user accounts depending on a variety of different factors. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys in the next video. Just a reminder, I know it's so played out, but if you please subscribe to my channel, we can quickly get us to that 1,000 subscribers, and the more subscribers I get, the more time I'm going to devote to this channel, and the more information you can get from me. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I usually try to answer every question that I can as quickly as possible. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good weekend.